everybody, this is Amanda, and we are playing Werewolf the Apocalypse. So if you followed Emily and I for a while, you know we've played a couple of Vampire the Masquerade games. Those fall under their, I think, parent IP called World of Darkness. So this is another game from the World of Darkness, except obviously this is about werewolves rather than vampires. So let's not waste any time and get going. Okay, cursor. Oh, character sheet, journal. Confirm. Okay, cool. So this looks like it's more based off the RPG. So we will have a character sheet, so that should have our character points in it. Premonition. This is a game about rage, and how it helps us do things that need to be done, as well as things that we later regret. Sometimes both. How do you feel about that? Okay, so we've got rage, willpower, and health. Up at the top, okay. Personally speaking, I like to think before I act, but then again, just judging by the way I play games, especially with scary games, I found that during our Resident Evil playthrough that my response to fear is anger, and that seemed to help me get through. I don't know, now that I have a sound mind right now, I don't think anger. I think it's just better to think before I act, so I'm gonna go with that one. Your rage is low. So, you're the observant and cunning type. That's okay. There's no right path here, just your decisions and their consequences. Let's just follow the path and see where it takes us, or consequences, schmonsequences. I'm smarter than that. Well, no, you're not smarter than consequences, because every action you take has a reaction to it, so no, you're not smarter than that. I'm gonna say let's just follow the path and see where it takes us. Spiritual, okay. But yeah, I agree with that so far. I mean, in terms of like RPG games, I do tend to go for a rogue type, so yeah, cunning and observant, I would agree with that. The woods are full of stars. They flicker, come closer, run away. They want me to chase them, to play hide and seek. Well, I like the stars, so I'll observe it rather than hide from them. Aspiring, analytical, spiritual. Okay, so right now I guess this really reminds me of the start of Kingdom Hearts. You know, where Sora is put on this platform and he has his friends from Destiny Island there, and they're all asking him these questions. I watch as they dance around the tree trunks, float up on the gusts of wind that shiver through the branches, disappear among the leaves. There are words in their dance, but I don't understand them. Not yet. Then they bunch up and fly toward me like an arrow. Rushing down, they're soon upon me, but just before the spear of light pierces my breast, they disappear and the dark of night returns. Okay, so it's saying low rage right here, so let's see what this says. In the darkness, the spirits keeping the forest alive whisper about the enemy. I begin to move, unnoticed, one with the night, and then I wake up. Cold and alone. Confused, I open my eyes. The forest around me is thick, dark, and reeks of decay to such an extent that it's hard to breathe. The smell fascinates me. I recognize this forest. Why am I here? I don't like the smell fascinates me. I'm going to ask why am I here, because just personally I feel like saying I recognize this forest would actually give me more It'll probably give more of an explanation later on, so let's say I recognize this forest. I know this place. I've been dreaming about this forest since I was a child. The tree trunks, wrapped tightly in the dark-leaved ivy, are covered in ripples of lichen, where the vines haven't taken hold. The thorny, leafless bushes at their base are overrun with nettles. The fungi radiate. Sorry, just checking my audio. The fungi radiate with the ghoulish, sickly green light. Dark, sponge-like mushrooms cling to the fallen trees. I try to breathe. I'm cold. Something is rotten. Well, something's rotten if fungi are radiating. I can't shake the feeling that something died nearby. I look down and see my hands covered in a dark substance. I'm naked. A sticky, glistening film of liquid is clinging to my skin. I can feel it on my face and my hair. Blood. I guess this is implying it's me, so I'm gonna say I'm alert. Because that would wake me up. Spiritual. Oh, that increased my spiritualism. I don't mind that, I think. Nature is never quiet. The leaves rustle in the wind. Small creatures scuttle in the undergrowth. There's a whisper. I don't understand what it means. The word resonates in my hand. Galro. Who said that? There is a severed head right in front of me. Some choices are hard to make if they strain your willpower. Once I touch it, I'm gonna be sick. So one seems to take away my rage, and one seems to take away my willpower? I'm guessing that Gauro, I hope I'm pronouncing that properly, I'm guessing that Gauro is the kind word for werewolf, much like kindred is the kind word for vampire. Why would I touch the head? I'm not gonna touch the head. I think that would make me feel a little sick, so I'm gonna be sick. Ooh, that turned my rage down a lot. I do like the artwork, though. The face is contorted, the eyes bulging, the mouth open, the tongue stuck out. It's obscene. I feel bile rising in my throat, and I start to retch. Then eyes open in the darkness. Who is it? Well, who is it? I can see their silhouette, shades of jet black against the darkness. They smell of fur and moss and bloodied earth. Massive creatures, some with horns, some with antlers. Their eyes burn like small, fiery windows into hell. I look at them, and something wakes inside of me. Okay, so this is telling me that my rage could also be used to fight back, so I guess I have no choice but to panic. But can I pick Defiance? I'm gonna try to pick Defiance, because that I know in my RPG heart that it's going to be a bad turnout for me, but I am a defiant person. I refuse to panic. Which will... Oh, my cunning went down, I think. They tell me stories of their lost battles and dying hopes, and I say no. I tell them my stories of the enemy and how they are so stupid, so clueless that we almost feel pity as we kill them. They listen and laugh. I laugh with them. In a moment of clarity, I almost understand what the forest wants from me. And then I wake up. Okay, yeah, that made me feel very much like the beginning of Kingdom Hearts. Alright, Chapter 1, Arrival. Maya? Maya, wake up! I opened my eyes. My neck was stiff. I stretched lazily as I assessed where I was out of the corner of my eye. I wasn't in the forest anymore. I was in a bus. The sun streaming through the windows was making it hard to see. The girl next to me was touching my shoulder, disturbed. Oh, so I'm kind of sad I used up all my rage, because I guess rage isn't a bad thing. So I guess all I can do is laugh it off. Okay, Anya's sympathetic. Nothing like a power nap, I laughed. She looked at me skeptically. You were laughing like... maniacally. I blinked. The memory of the dream was still there, and the taste of blood in my mouth. Look outside, I'm glad I'm not alone. I think if I keep looking at her, then, you know, that's gonna make her even more worried, because if she'll see my face. Okay, look outside. I looked outside. Trees were pushing up against the narrow road, their boughs tangled, their trunks carpeted with moss. It was the forest from my dreams. We're almost there, said the girl next to me. Her name was Anya. We'd met a couple of weeks earlier on the orientation day. She was from Norway, a tall, broad-shouldered, calm person who wore her long hair in braids. Somehow I'd managed to talk her into this crazy field trip across the land of my ancestors. Well, Anya's sympathetic, so let's be sympathetic back. She seemed excited. Anya reached into her backpack and took out 2 apples. I'm really happy we decided to come here, she said. Yeah, I said, offering her some of my cabanossi, dried, meaty sausages that were so much better than the original Polish ones back in the US. I was glad Anya had decided to come with me. I had problems keeping friends around and really needed one. I did some searching, she said from over her phone, and this place is amazing. The last primordial forest in Europe. This trip was my idea. Our summer language course was starting in a few weeks, and I'd managed to talk Anya into skipping the tours of concentration camps and old churches, and visiting Białowieża National Park with me instead. I'm assuming it's the W is pronounced as a V because I assume we're in Germany. So far it's beautiful, she said, her eyes smiling. But why are we here again? Good question. Why were we there? There being Białowieża, a small village in northeast Poland. Oh, Poland! Near the border with Belarus. Yeah, I mean, they said Polish sausages, I should have known. It was famous for its national park, the very last European bison, and, according to a quick web search, occasional tensions between far-right troublemakers and the local Belarusian community. The most honest answer would have been, because I've been dreaming about the forest in Białowieża since I can remember. But people don't understand when I said things like that. I looked in her eyes. Simple, so I wouldn't freak her out. I told her as much as I could. I told her everything. Well, we've only known this person for a few weeks, but I think it's still good to be honest, so let's go with the sort of middling option. Say I told her as much as I could. Family is complicated, okay. I looked her in the eyes. I wanted to see the forest. I heard it was a must. That wasn't technically a lie. When I was little, my grandfather told me stories about an ancient forest full of wonders, and the wolves that lived in it. It was all I got from that part of the family before my mom took me, ran away, and cut off all contact with my dad. But I remembered the stories well, and I remembered the name of the forest. Yeah, someone who's actually Polish, please pronounce that because I would be too embarrassed to mispronounce that. This will always be our home, my grandfather used to say. I waited for her to respond. Anya fell silent for a moment. I think it's great that you come from such a magical place, she smiled. The last ancient forest in Europe, thousands of years old. I wasn't sure if I was fond of that magic, but it was hard to ignore. And that was precisely why I needed to do something. Anything about my future. That damn forest and my weird-ass family. I had a clear goal in mind. I wasn't there by mistake. I'd planned this trip for months, with a clear goal in mind. I had to face the forest. I had to learn the truth about my roots. I had to figure out my destiny. Well, I would say that since this forest is haunting her, then we gotta face it to get over it, so let's say I had to face the forest. Goal. Mystery. Learn about the forest. My dreams. My grandfather's stories. The fact my family was from there. There are just too many coincidences. The forest wanted something from me, and it was time to find out what. But honestly, I had no idea what to expect. Welcome home. Bala Visa? I think that's an E, and I said it with a C. I think it's Bala Visa. Looked like an overexposed photo of a village with the contrast turned all the way up. It was a hot, sleepy day on a hot, sleepy street, and everything. The old trees, the yellow grass, the weathered wooden houses, the fences seemed almost normal. Everything except the shadows. They were sharp, as though they were freshly printed with the darkest of inks. And they moved. For a second, I could have sworn they'd moved. But then I realized it was just a black cat walking down the sidewalk. When it saw me, it stopped in its tracks. Well, yeah, let's try to pet it. Here, kitty kitty, I said, squatting and reaching toward the cat. It ran me affectionately with its head and started rubbing against my leg, totally ignoring the outstretched hand. Okay, cool, so because I'm glad we have zero rage then, because then the cat likes us. Hey, Maya? Anya said, looking at me surprised. Didn't you say your friend would be waiting for us? But he wasn't there, and the cat was still staring at me. Let's go. Anya's put on her backpack. I'm tired and I really, really need to find a toilet. For a moment, I was tempted to just get out of the sun and worry about my missing friend later. Alright, I guess this meeting's important, so let's go. Let's just wait a little longer, I said. I don't have his number, and we really need to meet up with him. His name was Bartek. I'd met him online while researching Bailavica. The man knew everything there was to know about the local history. I asked him to look around for local stories about the forest. I hope he's found something. I really need to pee. Anya said said it like I was a 5-year-old, and not a bright one. Well, let's get some rage back, so I guess we'll cave. Okay, let's go. I grabbed my backpack and stormed off, angry at Bartek, Anya's tiny bladder, and the creepy cat. But what did the cat do? Bed and breakfast. Bailavica had a few hotels and hostels, but the preferred form of accommodation was bed and breakfast. And that's where we stayed. We had a room on the second floor with a huge window and a great view of the forest. We dropped off our stuff and freshened up a bit. Maybe we should have waited for your friend, Anya asked, concerned. I shrugged. I'll find him, sooner or later. Before you go, check out your character sheet and journal. Square button and triangle button. For background, personality, goals, and so on. You can also check who are your friends and who your enemies are. Ooh. Okay, so we're an American student. We're not brave. We're not inspiring. We're not analytical. We're very, very spiritual and not very cunning. Okay. Anya's sympathetic to us, but our family is complicated. And the journal says nothing. Okay. Bailavisa was a quaint tourist town, but I had other things in mind. The lay of the land. I had a clear goal in mind. The forest was calling me, and I was ready to answer the call. The call of the wild. Anya went with you. Okay, I like this. This is different than Vampire the Masquerade, obviously. Oh, who's this guy with us? I'm gonna pause for some thoughts right at this moment. I like this. Something about it reminds me of Life is Strange. Because the different choices are affecting the relationships of the people around you, clearly, and also your own personality and how you see things. I do like that a lot. We'll see how things go, and if I like this better than Vampire the Masquerade. It was dark in the woods. Dark, humid, and chilly. The leaves didn't let through a lot of the sunlight. Daniel looked at Anya and me over his shoulder. How do you like her? We'd met maybe 20 minutes earlier. Anya had Googled local guides, and he was apparently the best person to go if you wanted to see the forest. So I found him, and now here we are. I wasn't sure whom he meant. He was a strange one. Well, let's just say I'm not sure whom he meant. We don't know if he's strange quite yet. Do you mean the forest? I asked. Polish was a strange language that gave the most unexpected genders to objects and ideas. I mean, pushka? Pushcha. The word sounded like the wind rustling in the leaves. Pushcha. Pushcha is the right word, not forest. Forests are like fields or orchards, cultivated. He spat as he said it. And Pushcha, she is older than even the concept of fields. He was using the word as though it were a name. Stood there and watched the forest. I looked at the Pushcha again. Okay, I guess this is are we going to treat it as a forest that's cultivated, or are we going to treat it as Pushcha? So let's treat it as Pushcha, I guess. I looked around with fresh eyes. I felt as though I'd entered an ancient tomb. Gigantic, dead trunks were decomposing slowly around me. Young plants and colorful mushrooms sprouting from them. The trees that still lived stretched toward the sky like columns holding up the vaulted canopy, which blocked out all but a few rays of sunlight. There was stillness and there was movement, darkness and light. If spirits existed, this place would be swarming with them. The trees that still lived, and a lot of them are decomposing, that's a little unsettling. So I'm going to say there's something unsettling about it all. Daniel, neutral. It's unsettling, I admitted. He smiled and nodded. It is. You're smart. He was a strange man, slender but muscular. Not the CrossFit type. It was more the kind of strength you get from working all day long in the open. His skin was weather-beaten and bronzed by the sun, like tanned leather, and he moved in a very deliberate way. But his fingers were slim and delicate, and his eyes were the strangest shade of yellow-green. Then I remembered why I was there. Told him I dreamed about the forest. I was cautious when I asked my questions. Well, we don't know this guy as much as well as we know Anya, so I'm gonna be cautious. You look like you know all the local legends and folktales, I said. I didn't elaborate why I was interested in the topic. Daniel stopped abruptly and turned to me, watching me for a while. His nostrils flared, and as though he were tasting the air. I don't share them with strangers, he said and then hesitated. But for some reason, the Puscha doesn't think you're a stranger. Come on, he started walking. I know exactly what you need to see. That piqued my interest. Okay, we got some more willpower. The forest recognized me. Okay, that's progressed our goal. So I was right. There was something hidden in my family's past, and it seemed to have a lot to do with the forest. Every time you learn or do something significant that brings you closer to your goal, you regain willpower. With every step, I was getting closer to solving the mystery, so I followed him. Crossroads. We have to choose a path. There's the old wolf den, or I could show you the barrows first, or a clearing that some folks call a place of power. Well, we are here for werewolves, aren't we? Let's go to the wolves' den. We started walking, but after a few steps he stopped abruptly, like he'd remembered something. Then he turned to me. Could you do me a favor, please? Well, I want him to like me. I want him to tell us, the stories of the forest, so let's say sure. Yeah, man, sure. What do you need? He ran his hand through the moss on a dead tree trunk, smelled his fingers, and then reached into the pocket. He took out a small stone. Just a stone amulet. It was valuable. Well, it might be valuable to him. It could be an amulet. Let's say it's an amulet. Oh, our spiritualism went up. A personal amulet of his, maybe? I felt my hair stand on end and my nostrils widen for some reason. The smell of the forest grew stronger. The game tracks your decisions on how Maya approaches problems. They will accumulate and gradually reveal what kind of person she is deep in her heart. The story changes to reflect Maya's personality. Okay, so this goes a little further than Shadows of New York did, which I like. I would like you to take this stone, he held out his open hand toward me, and throw it in the direction you think we should go. Well, I mean, why not? I mean, if nothing else. He would lead us out, probably. Okay, I said, reaching for the stone. I took the stone and closed my hand around it. Be careful, whispered Anya. Well, I'm going to say I'm curious, because I am. I'm curious what's going on. It was warm, and I felt grounded when I squeezed it. I closed my eyes and thought about the wolf den, trying to imagine that place. I thought about old wolf tracks and the bones of their prey. I threw the stone. I felt my hand rising entirely on its own and then throwing the stone as far as I could. When I opened my eyes, there was a path where the stone had fallen. I hadn't noticed it before. Okay, Daniel patted my back. Let's go. What's the purpose of this? Accomplish. Sympathetic. Okay, so the forest has a relationship with me then now. What was that for? I demanded. To introduce you, he answered with a faint smile, before he turned to head deeper into the forest. The first thing I noticed when we stopped was a pine tree. A pine tree I knew. I remembered it. Small, twisted, and crooked, with roots sticking out of the side of the hill on which it grew. I knew it was wise. Every bend of every branch held hidden knowledge that was waiting to be discovered. Months before that, when I decided to come to Poland, I dreamed of that tree. I was sure of it. Just like I was sure that under its roots I'd find a burrow, and a few feet away another one, like two dark eyes gazing at me as I approached. Daniel passed me and approached the tree. He pressed his cheek against the trunk. Said nothing. Was there someone else there? He's probably just introducing himself to the forest, so let's say nothing. Ooh, that went back to neutral now. I looked around, but we were the only people there, so I remained silent. A sudden gust of wind threw a cloud of dust in my face and my eyes. This is the den, announced Daniel. It's abandoned, of course, but still worth seeing. Why was it abandoned? What happened? I asked. Humans happened, Daniel sighed. He sat under the tree, leaning his back against it. It was a hot spring morning when they found this den. No one knows who the men were, even though it was only one human generation ago. There were 6 cubs here under the roots of this tree. He'd stopped stuttering and seemed to enjoy telling the story. Okay, well, when someone's enjoying telling the story, I usually enjoy listening. And I enjoyed listening to it. There's something calming in his voice and the way he talked. His slow gestures and wistful eyes made me feel as though I was with the cubs on that hot spring morning. I don't think they wanted to hurt the wolves, he continued. That's why they took the cubs with them. Humans have the instinct that makes you try to befriend everything, especially if it's dangerous. Befriend and slave, I didn't disagree. Yeah, we were like that. Well, I don't disagree. I think we do try to befriend animals. You know, I've been watching a lot of videos on YouTube of, lion cubs and lion prides, and everyone in the comments section just wants to be their friend or wants to cuddle the cubs, so I don't disagree. When you put it that way, I answered, unsure. Oh, I just noticed the artwork. It looks like the head of a wolf. That's clever. I just noticed that. I should have noticed that earlier. I'm not saying it always works out, but the intention is good. And I believe the men who kidnapped the wolves wanted to do something kind, he continued. Anyway, they took them. Out of the 6, 2 lived to see the cold summer that year. The wolf mother used to come to the farm they were at and howl. People went gray if they heard her. I knew that howl. And suddenly, I heard the howl. I knew exactly how it sounded, and I felt despair and longing gnawing at my soul. I remembered how the cubs reacted. They snarled at people, they whimpered for their mother to leave. They were silent. I don't think they would want their mother to leave. I would expect them to howl back, but this is the one that seems... I'm gonna go with the rage one. It seems unique to the fact that the rage is low, so... Ooh, cunning went up. That's good. I like that. I like that a lot. When she came, we never answered. Young as we were, we understood. There was no going back. Survival was the law, and despair was a weakness. Maya, are you okay? Anya asked, putting her hand on my shoulder. It was nothing. I liked how he told the story. I felt for the cubs. Well, I feel for the cubs. I just feel for the cubs. I know a little about divided families myself. Oh. Yeah, that usually ended the conversation. Daniel sighed, looking at the tree and the burrow. The cubs that survived were sold to some people in... I'm not going to try to pronounce that. But after a while, both of them ended up back in Bayalavisa with the scientists. They were stationed in the national park. One of the wolves, Kazan, was a celebrity of sorts. If you saw any wolf photos from here, they were probably of Kazan. He was even on postcards. Shouldn't have moved the cubs. I keep thinking about the mother. In the end, the smartest cub survived. Well, that does go with survival of the fittest, so let's go with that one, I think. Oh, and Daniel's now sympathetic to us. That's nice. It's impressive that Kazan survived, I decided. He was smart to befriend people. Daniel smiled. Survival is always good, he agreed. There was a slight gust of wind and the tree creaked. I remembered that sound from my dreams as well. Sound that made me feel safe. Let's try to get more information out of Daniel, now that he's sympathetic toward us. What happened to Kazan? And what happened later? I felt like I knew Daniel well enough to ask that. Is Kazan still alive? He lived for 8 years in the park. Daniel looked at me with his yellow-green eyes. Until they let another male wolf into his pen. I held my breath. They fought over the she-wolf and Kazan lost. Anya looked up from her phone. I've read about that. She sounded upset. They didn't notice he was wounded. It took him 3 days to die. Daniel shrugged. He lived a long life and died fighting. It was good. He looked at the burrows for a long time. This place is my friend, so I try to keep it important and respected. I think it's my mission, you know? Well, yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing too wrong or weird about that. Okay, and it looks like that's for my goal, too. I think I understand. The forest had a way of sending people on missions. Daniel looked at the tree one last time. Goodbye, he said. Well, let's say goodbye then, because I'm going to mispronounce these names so much. Goodbye, I repeated. The forest was alive around us, vigilant, but not alarmed by our presence. I kept thinking about the stolen cubs. Let's go to the graveyard. Because maybe there'll be something about like an actual person we can follow up on there. Red hills. The trail soon disappeared. Sometimes we walked along a barely visible path made by some animals. Sometimes we followed a stream or a gully. But for most of our trek, we walked through the dense undergrowth. Daniel was a great guide. He had no compass in hand, no map, yet we were headed dead north. And he moved through the forest with grace and ease, like it was his backyard and he was showing us around. It was a pleasant walk. Oh, the forest is making things easier for us, despite the skulls in the picture. It was a pleasant walk. There was always a path through the brambles, the ground was even, and the branches stayed out of our way. Almost felt like the forest wanted us to find a way. Daniel was a mystery I decided to solve. The forest was full of wonders. I think just because my rage is low, I know that this is probably going to make my spiritualism go all the way to the end, but you know, I'm just going to still pick it out. Oh no! It made my cunning go up. That's good. I want that. Walking through the forest, I couldn't decide what to do. I wanted to see, hear, touch, and taste everything. Wild strawberries were hiding in the bushes, fresh and sweet. Leaves glistened with droplets of dew. Snails, pebbles, strange plants and mushrooms, armies of ants marching across our path. Everything was a treasure. It was as though the Pushcha was showing us the best it had to offer. Let's resist the temptation. I haven't used up my willpower quite yet. And Pushcha is a lot more friendly to us now. I sighed, walking past yet another wild strawberry bush, but I resisted the temptation. Take only what you need, Daniel said, catching my gaze. We'd been walking for a while when I noticed that Daniel's steps had become slower. He was also looking around more often and had hunched slightly. Like we were lost. No, we're not lost. He knows where he's going. It must be the barrows. Are we there yet? I asked. He froze for a second as though he'd forgotten that I was there. They're tricky to find sometimes, he mumbled. Be quiet for a minute, please. That's when I felt it. Ash my mouth. The smell of smoke and wet soil. And a pole. And it felt weird. I feel weird, I whispered. Something like a pole? He looked intrigued, but not surprised. Okay, try to focus. Tell me where it's from. Let's focus, let's do it. I focused, and soon enough, I led us to a path on my left, under a dead tree. He followed me, and I followed my feet, knowing exactly where they should go. Under the crooked tree, past the dead trunk and the sponge-like mushrooms, across the patch of wet, dark green moss, all the way to a place that didn't look much different than the other parts of the forest, until you noticed the mounds. There's something about the flattened hills that drew my full attention. Must have been bigger in the past. I could remember. I felt dizzy. Well, they must have been bigger in the past, because, you know, erosion and weather. I could imagine them vividly where they were built. The tall, proud barrows, the dead decomposing underground, returning to the earth, feeding all the new life that was growing from them. The trees around us were the fingers of the dead, sticking out of the ground. And then it happened. It was a feeling anchored in my chest, akin to the taste of ash in my mouth and the smell of smoke. Longing, sadness, resignation. But there was more. A sense of scaredness. It filled me with a calm excitement, and when I closed my eyes, I saw a fire burning in the distance. Darkness, excuse me. Voices. The village was long gone. Its houses burned to the ground, its people slaughtered, but the spirits were still there. They'd accumulated over time, some in ancient Roman armor, some in rags, some in animal skins, some in uniforms from the World Wars, some in modern camo. Are we dead? Where are we? They asked me with frantic whispers. Is this hell? Well, it doesn't sound like paradise, so let's just call it only echoes. But they weren't real. Just echoes of the past. The spirits in the trees were real. When I opened my eyes, Daniel was watching me. You were somewhere else, he said. You said you had family here? Well, yeah, we do. I heard that my father's family came from here. I nodded. I don't know much about them, though. He sighed. I don't think you should be here, he said tersely. You're not ready. Not ready? He knew something. I didn't feel ready. Well, we're here, so we're ready as ever, so let's just say he knew something. Why? What do you know? I wasn't letting it go. About you? Not much. But I know the Pusha. The past is close here. His eyes were worried as he looked at me. And if the Pusha calls to you, it's wise to listen. But it's not wise to get lost in the voices. Come. On the way back, I was lost in my thoughts. The voices in the vision knew what I had to do. It's almost as though it was expected of me. Was this what the forest wanted from me? Well, that is part of our goal, isn't it? To find out what the forest is doing, so let's ask this question. Daniel said that the Pushcha had called to me. Was the vision showing me what the forest needed? Except that thought, I was scared. Well, I'm not particularly scared right now, so let's accept the thought. Hint, the forest showed me visions of blood and fire. I smiled. A bigger picture was finally starting to come to light. The Pusha wanted me to see her hidden side. I felt a little tired. The shadows of the enormous trees cooled the sweat on my skin. A taste of ash lingered in my mouth. All right, let's go to the place of power. It started with the hair on the backs of my hands rising. The air around me seemed brighter, lighter. The leaves in the tree trunks turned yellow and my skin started to prickle. I realized that I couldn't hear anything except for a low buzzing that was filling my ears. I couldn't think. Words appeared and disappeared in my head faster than I could notice them. I had to do something. Snap out of it. Rolled it to stop, tried to clear my head, took a step back. Well, I'm gonna go for it just because, again, it seems specific to the fact that I have low rage. I took a step back to assess the situation. I looked around and noticed there was a clearing nearby with some kind of wooden construction in it. There was also a shadow, the silhouette of a person moving slowly, deliberately. I approached. The clearing was a plateau between huge boulders. Oh, someone's sitting there. There were double-trunked trees between the rocks and an angular wooden construction that stuck out of the ground like a sore thumb. There was a bike leaning on it. But more importantly, there was a man, and he was moving the most beautiful, harmonious way I'd ever seen. It was hypnotizing. I looked at him for a moment, at the way his muscles danced under his tanned skin, trying to trace his movements. Before every grand gesture, every stretch, and every push, there was a micro-movement, an impulse from his core, but I could feel it was even deeper. The energy that had been filling me earlier took form. It was flowing in rhythm with his steps, with the flow of his hands. The words came out of my mouth, seemingly without my knowing. Well, what did he do? What? How? What did you do? He smiled. It's a little bit complicated. He stretched his hand toward me. I'm Cornell, he said with a hard German accent. Shouldn't you be on the logging site? Daniel asked him after I introduced myself. I needed to center myself, he answered. The others are still there, don't worry. Cutting down trees in the forest, center himself here. Well, it is a place of power, so that makes sense. So I guess he's cutting down trees in the forest. Wait, logging? Here? I couldn't believe my ears. He smiled bitterly. Yes, logging. Here. That's why I needed to calm down. This place is special, Daniel said. Some people call it a place of power, as I told you. They have good reason to, Cornell added. Look around you. So I looked. It was a clearing filled with light. I could see Cornell's traces, a beautiful pattern on the ground, but there was one thing that caught my attention more than anything else. The tower spoiled the serenity of the scene. The boulders around us were strange. Fruit trees? Well, I don't know too much about the tower. Let's just look at the boulders then. These rocks. Someone brought them here, right? I asked, looking at the boulders, which, upon closer inspection, formed a circle. The stones were irregular and nestled deep in the ground. People believed that this was a place of worship thousands of years ago, hence the fruit trees, the stone circle, and now the tower. And indeed, there's a lot of energy in this place. You felt it, didn't you? Well, I guess, yeah, if we had that reaction. Yeah, I felt it, I said without enthusiasm. The Pusha is wounded and in pain, and it calls out in rage to anyone who can hear it. Here this call is louder, you see. The logging. His eyes darkened. Is slaughter. Anya gasps quietly. Every priceless thing can be destroyed by greed. Logging is illegal, of course, but illegal is sometimes just a way of saying a bit more expensive but still profitable, especially for huge corporations. The forest is hurt. The wound is getting bigger, as is its desperation. Well, who is doing the logging? Let's find out about that. Oh, good, and my cunning is going up. I frowned. Who's doing the logging? Logging? I asked calmly. If anything was to be done here, it had to be done in an informed way. Cornell regarded me for a moment with a faint smile. You have a connection to this forest, don't you? You should come to the logging site and meet everyone. Absolutely, Anya said eagerly. Maybe he helped me with the dreams? Well, even if he can help you with the dreams, and Anya seems excited, so let's just say it sounds good. It could be the next step, and even if it wasn't, something had to be fucking done about the logging situation. Yeah, I'll come, I smiled. Great, you'll understand what you need to do. He jumped suddenly and looked at the wooden tower and the bike I'd noticed earlier. Die Schwalbe is getting restless, he said, and, as Daniel pointed out, I should be on the logging site setting up the protest. Schwalbe? What is a Schwalbe? I asked, confused. He named his bike Swallow, Daniel explained. He loves it very much. Oh, I do. Oh, Cornell grinned. Oh, I do. Nice meeting you, Maya. The moment he disappeared, the buzzing came back. It wasn't as strong as before, but it was there. All I wanted to do was get out of there. And with that, I'll go ahead and end this stream right here, but let me know what you guys think, and we will see you guys next week. But thank you so much for joining us today for Werewolf, the Apocalypse. Again, this is a different game from the World of Darkness, but, I'm liking it so far. But we'll see you guys next week, and thank you all so much. Have a good Sunday. Bye!